This is the second part of the invertebrates video. I split it up because I figured as excited as I am about all of these worms you get to meet, um, it's probably a lot if you watch it all in one sitting. Anyway, here are two more phyla of worms. The sipunculids. These are the peanut worms because someone squinted really hard and thought that that looked like a peanut. Doesn't really, but the cool thing about this guy is he has a muscle that goes from here to here. So if he needs to take his proboscis and scoot it in super fast, he can. But he doesn't have an opposing set of muscles. He can't pull this out. So what he has to do is he has bands of muscle around here. It has to go and squeeze as hard as he can. And then his proboscis will come out like a little toothpaste tube. You can find these on the docks down in Charleston and also living amongst the rocks in the Rocky Intertidal. And I have actually sat there and made one pull its proboscis in and out for like a half hour, and it was the best thing ever. This is a spoonworm. It's called a spoonworm because it's got a wormy part here. And then this proboscis is like a big old spoon, and it can scoop up delicious mouthfuls of sand and dirt to eat. Again, these are just phyla I'm mentioning. You're not going to have to know them in any detail. On to one you will, the nematodes. If you remember these from SpongeBob, they're represented as a herd of small white wiggly things. Nematodes are roundworms because they're round in cross section. They have bilateral symmetry and they're covered by a cuticle, which is shed. So it's a worm that sheds its skin. It has a complete gut featuring an anus and a mouth, a simple brain, it can sense light, and it doesn't have any circulatory or respiratory systems. It only has longitudinal muscles, so it can wiggle back and forth, but it can't go side to side. Some of you may have seen these in the Protus cultures. They're male and female, and they lay eggs that hatch into little worms. You can find these in freshwater, saltwater, and terrestrial. They are incredibly common and they are incredibly, well adapted to their environments. Here's the nematode anatomy. At this end, you have a mouth with a pharynx and intestine, and an anus. They have a muscular body wall, eggs in the uterus, and that's about it. But for being a simple little critter, they have a really complicated nervous system. Let's watch. Here's a little roundworm. He's roundworming along, and we're going to poke him. Run away, run away. So, even though he doesn't have a really complicated nervous system or anything, he can tell that getting poked is bad and run away. Okay, roundworms can be parasites. If I had you in person, this class, we usually dissect Ascaris. This looks like a bowl of noodles, but it's actually a bowl of worms. Here's what the larvae of those worms look like, encysting in the muscle fiber. They can mature in your intestines. The Ascaris that we usually dissect are pig parasites. This poor gentleman has a normal foot here, and then this foot, if you can still call it a foot, this has been infested with this worm. Its larva is cysting in the muscle, and this is called elephantitis because he's got like the foot of an elephant. Don't worry, there's a doctor who's going to help him. You can tell he's a doctor because he has this cool watch. Well, that and I read the picture caption in your textbook. All right, let's talk about Caenorhabditis elegans. That's Caenorhabditis elegans. It's kind of a fun name to say. Caenorhabditis is important because it's a model organism. Model organisms are organisms that are used as the basis for many experiments. And the reason why this one has been used, this particular species of roundworm, is they're cheap, they're transparent, you can see individual cells under the microscope. They're pretty easy to keep in culture. They'll eat the same agar that your bacteria grew in. Um, there you know the developmental fate of every single cell, which means you could point to a cell and say, this one right here. And you would know when the oh, you'd know I got this from Wikimedia. Nice. You would know that that cell was in the two cell embryo, the one on the left. You would know that when it went to the four cell embryo, it was the left top. You know how from a fertilized egg that cell becomes that cell. And because they have a relatively complex nervous system, you can try expose these to drugs, like drugs that you would want a human to one day take. And if it kills its neurons, you figure we probably shouldn't give it to humans. It's also easy to knock out the genes. So you can, I can't really say, well, here's a gene, I don't know what it does. I'm going to knock it out in my baby and then see what happens. But you can do that in these worms and figure out what the genes do. Okay, this is one of my, well, I guess I'd have to say it's my second favorite phylum, but mollusks are pretty rad. Mollusks include the snails, the chitons, the limpets, the squid, the octopi, that sort of thing. They're bilaterally symmetrical like us, and their body is covered by a mantle, a thick layer of skin. That's what you eat when you eat a squid. They have hearts. They have a muscular foot for locomotion. In some species, this has been modified into things like tentacles. They have a radula, which we'll talk about in a minute, a complete gut, and a veliger larva. So here we have the little snaily dude. Here's his mouth, and the radula is a toothed tongue. Snails use this radula to scrape up food, and the ones that are venomous use this to stab you and deliver their poison. Their their gut twists around to the stomach, and then unfortunately it ends with an anus right over their head. So snails are constantly pooping on their heads. They all have gills. The ones that live on land have a modified little breathing chamber that we'll talk about in a moment. And contrary to popular belief and what Gary told you on SpongeBob, snails can't actually leave their shells. They have muscles that attach to the shell as if the shell were a bone. So you cannot remove the shell and have the snail be okay. In fact, if you remove the shell, you'll see that its body is curled and it actually is the shape of this shell. Here's a scanning elect. Whoop, There's a scanning electron micrograph of a radula. You can see all the teeth on it. They're pretty awesome. Here's torsion. When a snail is newly formed, its anus discharges waste into the mantle cavity, but after the shell twists the first time, the anus goes over the shoulder. Okay, so here is a banana slug. They have a lung, but only on one side. If you look on the passenger side of a slug, you can see this pneumatosome, this hole that leads to a lung. It's a big chamber in here that's used for gas exchange. This little bit here is the mantle, eye stalks, and the whole bottom here is the foot. This is a giant African land snail. They can grow until this is the size of a football. They're really fun, but they're illegal to keep in most states. We had a few in the snail lab just for grins. Here you can see this little limpet. It's like a volcano shelled snail. It doesn't have a twisted shell. You can see his radula scraping the side of the tank and his foot. The mantle is what lines his shell and secretes the shell. These are nudibranchs, also known as sea slugs, although they're so beautiful. I wish they weren't, you know, I love banana slugs, but they do kind of look like a dog poo. These look gorgeous. Okay, you will be virtually dissecting a bivalve. Bivalves are called that because they have two shells. They're bivalves. They're a lot simpler group than something like a squid that has to have a brain and eyes and such. But all it needs to do is live in the dirt and the mud and filter things out. So if you look at the inside of a clam, they have a two siphons. One brings the water in, one takes the water out. When the water goes in, it goes over the gills. The gills are used for gas exchange as normal, but they're also covered with sticky mucus. Food particles and other dirt will and sediment will hit the gill and get stuck in this mucus. The mucus will move over here, and then these palps will lick the mucus off of the lungs and into the mouth. Yum, it's time for a mucus meal. They also have a foot. The foot is what will dig in the dirt when you start digging to try to get away from you. The shell is lined with a mantle which secretes the shell. When you eat fried clams, you're eating the adductor muscles, these two muscles that hold the shells together. In scallops, they only have one big adductor muscle, the other one is really small. And so when you eat a scallop, you're just eating a big thing of muscle. When you're eating oyster, you're eating the whole animal, gonads, stomach, all of its parts. It's a little weird. Most of the time, you wouldn't be like, here's a cow, let's eat the whole thing. You would be like, I'm going to eat the muscle of this cow. But for oysters, we're like, you know what? Why not? Also, fun fact, the males taste creamier because of the structure of their gonads. I have a hard time eating oysters now. This is the scallop we were talking about. The scallops have all of these beautiful blue eyes, and they will actually swim away from you. These are found in the Atlantic Ocean, and if you go snorkeling, they will swim by you, and it's like watching castanets. Here are mussels. We have mussels on our coast. Our mussels aren't particularly good to eat, but they are important filter feeders. Unfortunately, we found that they have cancer, and it's a cancer that's can spread from mussel to mussel. So, we're kind of trying to figure out what's happening there. Okay. Here's the anatomy of a squid. You'll notice it's a lot more complicated than the bivalve. Instead of having two shells, the squid has an internal shell called the pen. This is what helps it maintain its shape. It has arms and two long tentacles. It has a radula on the inside its beak. So the beak is for tearing, and then the radula is more for grinding. Here's the esophagus, but there's its brain. I always thought this was weird, and I wondered if he ate something too big, would he break his brain? Would he get a little squid headache? I don't know. So many things unanswered. So here's the digestive system, and the reproductive organs are kind of behind that. And at the end of the digestive system, near the anus, you have an ink sac. So if a squid gets startled, it can release the ink and swim away. There's two feathery gills inside the mantle. The mantle is the outer covering here. And then their foot, or part of their mantle, sorry, the foot would be this part, but it's modified to form a siphon, so they move by jet propulsion. Right. Oop. So, let's watch this thing on the mimic octopus. It is the coolest octopus ever. No, I don't need a coupon, honey. Look at him, he's got horns above his eyeballs.
It's a masterly quick change artist, altering not just its shape, but even its behavior to impersonate a whole range of other creatures. If danger threatens,
oh no, it's a crab!
Color change is no problem.
Whoa! I like how the crab is going, ta-da! And the octopus is like, don't mess with me, dude. Terrence, I told you, don't mess with me. Go away, I'm angry colored.
Time to move on.
Oop, but look how he's swimming.
Its shape to imitate a flounder, flattening its body and matching the color of the sand.
I am a flounder. You can't see me. Totally a
moving in
flounder.
slow across the bottom, just like a real flounder.
He does the best impressions.
Most octopuses are very vulnerable in open water. Usually they hide amongst rocks or
You can see
corals,
his siphon there.
and if they have to flee, they dart away behind a cloud of ink.
Ooh,
This
who's he
mimic
trying to be
has
now?
another trick up its sleeve.
Who's he trying to be?
It alters both shape and behavior to impersonate a fish that swims well above the bottom, a lionfish.
Yep, those are
Lionfish
poisonous.
fins are tipped with venom, so predators learn to avoid them. By its deceit, the octopus shares that protection.
Yeah, good job, little buddy.
Back on the sand, and it's being pestered by an aggressive damselfish.
I had one of those bite my watch because he thought it was my eye. It was back in the early 2000s when digital watches were
The
cool.
sea snake.
Sea
Sea
snake.
snakes are amongst the most poisonous animals on Earth. They use their venom to immobilize their prey, small fishes like damselfish.
Isn't that so cool? So the octopus can just be like, heck yeah, I'm your predator. Get out of there. I really think, the only failing of the octopus is that when they die before their babies hatch or as their babies are hatching. So they can't teach the next generation. I really think that if octopi lived longer, they'd be the ones ruling the world and like driving around in little ocean cars. So octopi are one of the cephalopods. In addition to the squid, and this guy here isn't a squid, he's a cuttlefish. So if you ever had a parakeet and you had a cuttle bone in there for them to chew on, that's actually the internal shell of this guy. Here there's a paper nautilus, and this is a chambered nautilus. The design of the chambered nautilus has been the same for millions of years. Okay, I think we're going to close, we're going to close this section with me talking about the giant squid. These guys are so flippin' cool. Their maximum size is 43 feet for females. Now that does include the tentacles, or 33 feet for males. And here's a picture of two people examining a giant squid. Like if you were getting in a wrestling contest with a giant squid, I am pretty sure one of them would win. Now, the thing is, the giant squid live in the deep sea, so we don't really see them a lot. You just see dead or dying specimens washing up on the beach. The first time that they were captured, photographed, and seen live in the wild, not like a dying specimen, but a live one, was in 2006. I was already out of college then. That's just wild to me.